This is the EuroPi from Allen Synthesis. In this video series, we'll take a closer look at the module and what it has to offer. So let's get started. There are many EuroPis out there in the wild. There's also a thriving online community that regularly discusses all things hardware and software related to the EuroPi. The EuroPi is 8 HP wide and around 48mm deep. At its core, it runs a Raspberry Pi Pico, which means that we can change the function of the module by writing code using the MicroPython programming language. It has a digital input where we can send clocks, gates and triggers. It has an analog input that can receive 0 to 10 volts. It has an OLED screen, 128 by 32. It has a couple of knobs. It has a couple of push buttons. And it has 6 CV outputs. Each of these outputs is capable of sending 0 to 10 volts. It is available as a DIY kit, or you may be able to find some pre-built modules online. As well as being able to write your own code for the EuroPi, there are many existing scripts available, from Bernoulli gates to a CV recorder, a Turing Machine script. There is a master clock and clock divider. There's a script that creates smooth random voltages. There are lots of existing scripts. In this series, we'll take a deep dive into the EuroPi and each of the available scripts. So let's get started. When you first boot up the EuroPi, it automatically runs the last script that was used. In this case, the last script that was used was the menu system, so it automatically loaded up the menu system. To get to the menu system at any time, we can press and hold both buttons for a few seconds, and that will load into the menu system. Now, on this module, we'll select the master clock and clock divider. On this one, we'll select the consequencer. And for the remainder of this video, we'll take a closer look at these two scripts, the master clock and clock divider, and the consequencer script. The master clock has an internal clock, as you can see now. It also supports an external clock, and the external clock would be sent into the digital input. If we are using the internal clock, we can send a gate into the digital input, which will reset all of the clock dividers back to the first step. Also, when using the internal input or the internal clock, we can send CV to the analog input, and that will vary the BPM to create wonky beats. Each of the outputs supports a clock division of divided by 1, so the same as the internally generated or incoming external clock, all the way up to divided by 128. And there is a final random gate option, which will cause random gates to be fired from the configured output. There are a number of different display modes for the master clock. By default, we see here on the top left the BPM. On the top right, we show on the left hand side the percentage duty cycle for the gates being sent out, and then the duration in milliseconds. So for example, at 100 BPM, if we configure 50% duty cycle gates, which means the gate will be high for 50% of the clock cycle, then that duration just happens to be 75 milliseconds. Also on the display, we show the divisions used for each of the 6 outputs. So we can see there divided by 1, divided by 2, divided by 4 are used for outputs 1, 2 and 3, and then divided by 8, 16 and 32 are used for outputs 4, 5 and 6. A short press of button 1 either starts or stops the module, the clock, and a long press allows us to select an internal or external clock source. So for us, we will choose B1 as the internal clock source. To configure the module, we simply press and hold B2. Then we use the left knob to select what we would like to change. and then we use the right knob to change that. So if we wanted to change the BPM, maybe we take it down to 82, and we still have a 50% duty cycle. If we'd like to change that, we can move across to the next option, and then we can select a different option. So here, maybe we wanted 8 millisecond clock triggers to go out. We can also go and configure the clock divisions. So we can see that it supports divided by 1 all the way up to 128, and then the final option is R for a random output. And once we've changed the settings, we can just press either button or press B2 for example to go back to the start. And here we can see it's running and we're showing the second screen. We can alternate through screens using B2. The second screen shows essentially an instruction that we can use B1 to start and stop, and it also shows the number of full cycles based on the clock division. So if we have a clock division of 128 for example, then this would increment after every 128 cycles, and then the other value is just simply the count. So we can see here whatever maximum value we've got configured. I'll just keep going around. A little later on in the video we'll have a play with both the master clock and also the consequencer script. So before we play with the master clock, let's take a closer look at the consequencer script. The consequencer is a gate sequencer and random stepped CV generator inspired by grids from Mutable Instruments and the Turing Machine from Thing Modular. Outputs 1, 2 and 3 send gates, and outputs 4, 5 and 6 send random looping stepped CV patterns. The idea being, you would send gates or triggers to drum modules from 1, 2 and 3, and then you would send CV out of 4, 5 and 6 to those same drum modules to vary patterns. For example, sending CV into the pitch or decay controls. On the display, we can see 3 horizontal lines and then a number of visualizations of values at the bottom. On the 3 horizontal lines, each represents an output. So the top is output 1, the middle is output 2, and the bottom is output 3. And then horizontally is a representation of the steps in a 16-step pattern. 32 pattern steps are also supported, but they are not shown on screen, they're simply looped. You can select a pattern using knob 1, and when you select the patterns, or when you change a pattern, there is no break, so there's no noticeable glitch at all. So essentially you can cycle through different patterns and it won't skip a beat. The CV output, the random looping stepped CV output, is generated. So by default we have C0, which is a CV pattern 0, and that will be played out of 4, 5 and 6. We can generate a new pattern by pressing button 2. So we can see we've now gone from 0 to 1, 2, 3, 4. So now that's showing 4, which means we have 5 random step CV patterns. We can cycle through those. So if we want to go back to pattern 3, we simply press button 1, back to pattern 2, pattern 1. Or we can generate new ones by keep pressing button 2. You may have noticed on the bottom right of the screen there is a number indicating the pattern number. So you can see here we've gone from 0 to 52, so we have 53 patterns preloaded onto this. On the patterns, some of them you will see they have a dash. Let's go to the start. The dash means that is a probability based step. The probabilities and the patterns can be added to the Python script yourself, or you can simply use the preloaded ones. Also on the screen there is an M to note or to show the mode that it's working in, and by mode we mean what does the analog input do. So in the first mode, M1, the analog input controls randomness. So the higher the CV value, the more randomness will be played on the steps. We can also control randomness manually using knob 1. So essentially we can create a manual break or a fill just by ramping up random and then bringing it back down. Or we can create a break or a fill by sending an envelope into the analog input. The other two modes that are supported, so mode 1 is randomness. Mode 2, so the sending CV into the analog input selects the pattern. So rather than changing the pattern using this knob here, we can send specific values to select a particular pattern, or we can send cycling CV, which will morph between patterns to create unique fills, or just generally unique gate patterns or drum loops. Mode 3, if we press and hold button 2, you can see we're cycling through the modes. Mode 3, when you send analog or CV into the analog input, that CV will control the selection of the CV. So you can see we're not able to change that at the moment using these buttons because we're in mode 3. So that's only changeable using CV. There is a demo video online for the consequencer, which I'll link to down below in the comments, so you can check that out and you can see me playing around with this and showing off all of its different functions. But for now, let's play around with a patch involving both the master clock and the consequencer. Okay, so we've done a lot of talking, let's do a bit of playing. So I've just put this case together. Bit of a sort of percussion rhythm box. It has the master clock here on the left and the consequencer next to it. We have the quad drum from vpme.de. We have the crucible from WMD. We have the craziness of the decarples at the end, and then we have a Bifaco ST mixer at the end. This is going into some spring reverb at the end. You'll hear that on some of the sounds. So everything is being driven essentially by the master clock. The first connection, this orange cable here, is the output number 1, so that's always divided by 1 clock division. That is driving the consequencer. So let's go through each of the individual sounds and then we'll play them all together. So let's start with the crucible. The crucible, the WMD crucible, is being triggered by output number 6 on the master clock, which is A divided by 8. Next we have the craziness of the decarples. This is being triggered by output number 5, which is A divided by 1 clock. You'll notice that there's a variation in that sound, and that is because we are modulating the decay input on the decarples, this purple cable here, using output number 4, so random stepped CV from the consequencer. You'll notice when we change CV patterns, so essentially using buttons 1 and 2 to cycle through them, we are varying the sound. Okay, next we have a number of different channels on the QD, the quad drum. Let's start with the blue channel. So the blue channel is being triggered by, let's follow the cable, the grey cable, being triggered by output number 3 on the master clock. This is set to random, so it's essentially sending random gates to trigger it. We are also modulating, the pink cable here, modulating the mod control on the QD, which is changing the sound of the drum. And that's being modulated by random step CV from the consequencer. Let's have a listen to that. That's adding quite a lot of randomness to it. So hopefully we've got enough other percussion elements to hold that one together. Next, we have the first of one of those elements that will help hold things together. So this is a clap stroke snare sound, the green channel here, and this is being triggered by channel number 2 on the consequencer. Pretty straightforward. Next we have the yellow channel on the quad drum. This is a hat sound. It's being triggered by the hat channel, the 3rd channel on the consequencer, and we are also modulating the pitch using this black cable using the consequencer, the stepped random CV from the consequencer. This is how that sounds. So you can hear increasing the decay accentuates a bit, but you can hear when we change channels, CV channels on the consequencer, we are varying the pattern sent to the quad drum. Okay, so let's have a play around, let's have a listen, see what it all sounds like together. Okay, so let's have a play around with some different patterns. finally, let's use the analog input. So we're in mode 1, which means if we send CV to the analog input, it will increase the randomness. I have, coming out of output number 4 here, a divided by 32 clock, which is triggering an envelope. The CV from the envelope is coming out of this green cable and going into the analog in, which means every 32 clock beats, a lot of randomness will be sent into the consequencer, which will cause a bit of a fill. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so there we have it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.